Wow. Hey, everybody. Gonna be talking today about the Mattamuskeet Indians, free people of color. And I say free people of color. They actually were classified eventually as, free people of color. I'm gonna show you guys. On the cover right here, we got William Weisbeer, King Chief. Give him a special shout out, Kawu Kumi. Send me the link. Thanks for sharing that with me, brother. I was like, hey, I gotta definitely share this with the rest of the tribe, the family. So right here, what we're looking at is just the portrait. It says here drawn by John White, about 1585 to 1593. This just doesn't really prove much, but hey, just wanted to show you guys because this guy's gonna be talked about a little bit. I've shown this image before. A lot of people have, with them in the corn and everything. So what we're looking at is these North Carolina Shore Indians, one of the first people or tribes that the first colony or attempted colony, the Roanoke colony, basically encountered when they got here. Get a little bit of the story of who they are, you know. Says here, this is from the book. Let me just give it, The American Indian in North Carolina. Right? This is a very scholarly book, actually. Let me see the author. Well, it comes right up when you look for it. The American Indian in North Carolina. I believe the author's Wrights. His last name is Wrights. Says here, the first colony. The report of the first expedition was received in England with great enthusiasm. The Queen was delighted and proudly bestowed the name Virginia upon the newly discovered country. Sir Walter Raleigh hastened to make preparations for the first colony. Sir Richard Grenville commanded the fleet that sailed from England on April 9, 1585. Among the 108 colonists were Ralph Lane, appointed governor, Thomas Harriot, historian and scientist, Philip Amadas, captain of the first expedition, Manteo and Wanchis, returning natives. Now remember, something very important I want you guys to remember, especially those who've been with me, at least in the last year, what we've been learning about the original colonists that were coming over from Europe, right? Who were they? Let's not forget, a lot of these people carried Sephardic Jewish Moorish names, crypto names, Protestant, Huguenot, all right? A lot of these people were being persecuted in Europe by the Catholic, and so one of their best things was to, come over here, and assist in colonization, at the same time help themselves through their persecution. A lot of these, again, were people of color, so-called black people, all right? After a voyage by way of the West Indies, the fleet sighted Cape Fear on June 23rd, and 3 days later anchored at Wokokon, Ocracoke. On July 3rd, they sent word of their arrival to Wingina at Roanoke. 2 scouting parties were sent out. One party visited Croatoan on the sandbanks. The other set out for the mainland and reached Indian settlements in the following order: July 12, Pomoyok; July 15, Aquascoke; July 15, Secoton. All right? I want to emphasize these are Algonquin-speaking tribes that were on the shore of North Carolina. In the same order, the probable locations of these towns were on Gibbs Creek, Hyde County, southwest on the coast of the same county, and on the north bank of Pamlico River in Beaufort County. The great lake they found, called Paquipe, was evidently Mattamuskeet. On their return occurred the first unfriendly encounter with the natives, reported as follows. The 16th returned thence, and one of our boats with the admiral was sent to Aquascocoke to demand a silver cup which one of the savages had stolen from us, and not receiving it according to his promise, we burned and spoiled their corn, all the people being fled. Oh, you burned our corn, right? You burned our corn, huh? Foreshadowed in this unhappy event was the long series of conflicts between incoming settlers and Indians that spread through territory now included in every state of the Union. The fleet anchored at Hatteras. Hatteras, all right? These are, I want you guys to pay attention to these Indian tribes, all right? These are all different chiefdoms, you know, and these names we never really hear. And we always thinking, a lot of these people got classified as East Cherokee Band. Misclassified as East Cherokee Band. Everybody got generalized into East Cherokee. A lot of these tribes. So that's what I'm saying. We got to go past, what we just hear and just let's get specific. And maybe if you like, that's up to you guys, to really know exactly what clan, what subgroup, what tribe you might be actually coming from. A lot of these tribes supposedly went extinct, and we're gonna read things like that today. But watch the hijack because you're still here. You're still here. All right. Again, the fleet anchored at Hatteras. The Hatteras again, very related to the actual original indigenous group that the Crotons, also they blended with the Crotons and became Crotons, and a lot of these were originally Hatteras, the Crotons. All right, the fleet anchored at Hatteras on the 27th, and 2 days later, Kurimeo and with Manteo came to welcome the colonists. Remember, Manteo was the guy who helped the Roanoke, colony, and supposedly, they, rumored, when they got lost, that they might have gone with Manteo and joined his tribe. So here it is again. So it says here he came to welcome the colonists. Governor Lane began a series of explorations. He became convinced that a much better location could be found for the new colony. He has lured also by the expectation of finding precious metals, a prospect made more attractive by the fanciful tales of the Indians. Many of his men were ill-fitted for pioneer life and were not satisfied to settle down to hard work. That's very important. We've gone over this. When we read the genealogical history, the Jews and Muslims in British colonial America, about these early pioneers, supposedly, a lot of them were bankers, were tailors. They weren't these farmers. They weren't used to none of this stuff, man. A lot of them were Sephardi Jews and Moors that were just fleeing, families fleeing persecution. So they had to, when they got here, forcefully learn how to survive. And that's why a lot of them didn't make it, so this was something we pointed out in my previous videos, that it didn't make sense why they were bringing these type of people over here, that couldn't even survive. They didn't even know how to camp, build fires, and nothing like that. It says many of his men were ill-fitted for pioneer life and were not satisfied to settle down to hard work. Consequently, instead of building a strong base at Roanoke, he spent most of his time treasure hunting, dependent on the Indians to furnish corn and to aid in fishing in order to provide sufficient food for his men. This task became burdensome to the Indians and was the cause of later troubles aggravated by the imprudent and unfriendly conduct of some of the colonists. On the mainland north of Alabama Sound, including what are now the counties of Currituck, Camden, Pasquotank, and Perkimans, was the Indian province Wepomeok, ruled by the chief Okisco. This was visited early in August. All right. So I just wanted to get a little bit of that coming in. I want to go specifically to the people we are learning about. In May 1761, the Reverend Alexander Stewart, right? Stewarts, who were the Stuarts in England and Scotland, who was the Stuarts, Jacobites, who was King James, he's a Stuart. The Stuarts are colored people. Missionary. All right, it says, Reverend Alexander Stewart, a missionary of the Society of Propagation of the Gospel, wrote of his visit to Hyde County, including this mention. I likewise, with pleasure, informed the society that the few remains of the Mattamuskeet, Hatteras, and Roanoke Indians, whom I likewise mentioned in a former letter, appeared mostly at the chapel and sent fond of hearing the word of the true God, of being admitted into the church of Lord Jesus Christ. Men and women, children were baptized by me. I could have wished the adults were better instructed, but their sureties, a northern Indian among them, who had been bred up as a Christian, promised to take that care. 2 years later, the same clergyman made another voyage to Hyde County and reported the remains of the Mattamuskeet, Roanoke, and Hatteras Indians lived mostly along the coast, mixed with the white inhabitants. Gosh, the hijack, they mean Europeans. Many of these attended at the places of public worship while I was there and behaved with decency, seemed desirous of instruction, and offered themselves and their children to me for baptism. They were probably desperate for survival. And after examining some, the adults I accordingly baptized 6 adult Indians, 6 boys, 4 girls, and 5 infants, and for their further instruction at the expense of society, called Dr. Braid's associates, who have done me the honor of making the superintendent in their schools in this province, have fixed a schoolmisters among them to teach 4 Indians, 2 Negro boys, and 4 Indian girls to read and to work, and have supplied them with books for the purpose of and hope that God will open the eyes of the whites everywhere, that they may no longer keep the ignorant in distress, but as such charitable design. All right. So you see what the plan was. They came with their gods, right, and their religions. And a lot of the time, again, it's very ironic because a lot of these people, again, weren't even Catholics themselves. They were just crypto. They were new Christians, crypto Jews, though, or crypto Muslims. So, it's ironic. Hold on, I want to read about John White. John White is the guy who painted this painting right here. It says 75 drawings that artist John White made on that trips have survived. White drawings. So in 1585, English expedition to Roanoke Island had the same idea in mind. So I guess John White wasn't that original, expedition. So these drawings are supposed to be, from that time. Let's see, I just wanted you to guys see. So they kind of try to paint like this paradise place, like everybody happy. There's fishing, there's abundance, because they were selling this idea to the Europeans over there. It says White's images illustrated ways that the American Indians might be useful to English colonization. And thus the hijack with the English. Remember my video, Virginia's not so English colony. Europeans could see productive and welcome inhabitants with ample food and land. Their villages were orderly, and they demonstrated their intelligence by using nature to survive and flourish. In White's drawing, the Indian village of Secoton, houses appear along a central lane. There are trees on one side. On the other side, Indians have cleared land for planting. White shows 3 plantings of corn in different stages of growth: corn newly sprung, green corn, and ripe corn. 3 cornfields emphasize the productivity of land and food. White's images stress a natural abundance that would enable the English to survive and grow. Another drawing that emphasizes the abundance of food in the New World is Indians fishing. White shows American Indians in a canoe with fire between them. All right, so before we continue, I just want to show you what he's talking about. So he's talking about this image right here. All right, you see, copper colored tribes. All right, look at the abundance of fish everywhere, right? Fish everywhere. Fish, they got the fire going. Look at, they got the trap for the fish over here. It's just fish everywhere, right? Right. All right, so it says a fire was used to attract fish, particularly at night. In addition to other people in the background fishing with spears, White includes detailed drawings of various fish that the Indians might catch. Shellfish and a fish trap appear on the left side of the drawing, and birds are flying in the sky. White fills the page with signs of plentiful food. The natives' people can feed themselves. Maybe the English hoped that they could feed the colonists too. You see that? They were relying on they're relying on the indigenous people of the Americas to survive, because again, a lot of these people were not used to that. They had different professions. They were just regular people who were fleeing. They were trying to settle their people over here, that were being persecuted by the Catholics mostly. So Europe was trying to get rid of their undesirables, and at the same time, they used them to colonize America. So White also includes observations that might challenge English colonization and English relationships with the American Indians, such as religious differences. For example, White draws an ossuary temple, a building that houses bodies of deceased Indian chiefs that have been mummified. Oh, you thought that was only a so-called Egyptian thing? Or what? You didn't know we had the oldest mummies in the world in Peru and in Chile? The Chinchorro mummies? Oldest mummies in the world. Older than Sudan, older than so-called Egypt. All right? So, yeah, they were mummifying their chiefs over here too, in the east coast of USA, a ritual that Christians do not perform. A squatting idol overlooks the preserved bodies, suggesting that the Indians were a pagan society, that's according to them, right? That worship many different gods instead of Christian's single God. So that's, their take on, trying to say, many gods. How do they know what they're doing? You know, the lack of clothing worn by the Indians in the drawing shows the warm climate of Roanoke and differences from English customs. Two detailed drawings of villages indicate a relatively large native population needing food and land of its own. Palisades around one village showing the American Indians' capability to make war and to protect themselves. These drawings served as a reminder to English settlers and investors of possible disagreements to overcome. So you see, they were selling this idea to them. Despite the differences in clothing, language, religion, and social organization, White shows some similarities between the English and Indians. His portraits of elders and chiefs told the interested colonists about more than just each individual subject. Overall, the people in the portraits are similar, laughing or talking. They wear ornaments such as necklaces, headbands, earrings, and feathers. The Indians' ornaments such as bracelets and necklaces of copper and pearls emphasize something in common with English. Clothes and jewelry could identify American Indian leaders just as they did English rulers and people of wealth. Think about portraits of Queen Elizabeth. She is covered with pearls, jewels, and rich fabrics. White's drawings of Indians include wood, fur, leather, shells, clay, stones, beads, and copper. Some of these materials were used to make weapons. White was sure to include them in his drawings as resources available in the New World. These resources were important for trading with American Indians or for making money by selling them back in Europe. White's drawing of an Indian man and woman eating might suggest that both groups had social lives and organized gatherings, as also seen a fire ceremony. Indians fiction illustrates that like the English, American Indians worked in teams. All right, so that's just a little bit about this. This is from the North Carolina, and actually the Encyclopedia of North Carolina, and this is a little expert from their website. All right, a little bit of the drawings here. Some of his drawings that he made, right? Yeah. Wow. Antangka. All right, so we're in the Encyclopedia of North Carolina, edited by William S. Powell. All right, University of North Carolina Press, used by permission of the publisher. All right, fair use. We just building and learning here. All right, look at that. That's the drawing again. Maybe you can see they look a little darker here in black and white. It's a copy of John White's drawing. It's a copy though. We just saw the original, and it says here. The Mattamuskeet Indians, also known as the Machapunga or Mattamuskeet Indians, inhabited the region of present-day Hyde County at the time of the attempted settlement on Roanoke Island in the 1580s. According to explorer John Lawson, by 1701, the Mattamuskeet Machapunga were reduced to a single village called Mattamuskeet and numbered about 30 warriors, representing a probable total of less than 100 people. The Mattamuskeet were known as expert watermen. They likely became dependent on European trade, as did their neighbors. And in the years prior to the Tuscarora War, 1711-13, they undoubtedly witnessed their share of the clashes that were becoming frequent between the natives and the European settlers. Along with Bay River Indians and the Plumlico Indians, all right? Again, remember the names of these tribes. The Mattamuskeet joined the lower Tuscarora, the Kori, the Wakan, and possibly other tribes in fighting against European settlers in the Tuscarora War. All right? Again, we don't just have the five civilized tribes, there's so many other tribes they never taught us about. They just wanted us to forget about these people. There's a specific reason for that. I hope you guys are seeing the patterns. Why? A lot of these supposed extinct tribes. Following the war, several remnant Indian bands, comprised mainly of Mattamuskeets and Koris, were relegated to a Mattamuskeet reservation, an isolated tract of about 36 square miles of marsh and low ridges bordering Lake Mattamuskeet in Hyde County. The Kori evidently did not remain long on the reservation. The Indians occupying the reservation began selling off their land to white settlers as early as 1731, and the final sale, dissolving the reservation, occurred in 1761. All right, again, just want to remind everybody, I know it's repetitive, but dodge the hijack. When they say white settlers, they just mean Europeans. That could include pale skin and swarthy, so-called black Europeans. All right, so they're selling land also not just to pale skinned people, but black, so-called black Europeans. Straight up, it's not always the evil white man. Sporadic references to surnames common among these Indians continued to be recorded through the 1800s, and some surnames survive in Hyde County today. And a lot of the times, we got to dodge the hijack because they say sell. It could have just easily been, people who were getting married, amalgamating, assimilating, and it was just becoming family as well. And then the land could have been lost later on. But, I just wanted you guys to know it wasn't just a white thing. The Mattamuskeet apparently faced constant pressure from European settlers. And in 1724, Mattamuskeet kings, John Squires, all right, and John McKee, petitioned the colonial council for their lands to be surveyed and conveyed as a formal grant. The grant was approved in 1727, but the actual survey seems never to have occurred. The Indians had been given 10,240 acres, but in reality they received a considerably large number of acres in exchange for 2 buckskins and an annual quitrent of 1 shilling per 100 acres. Squires served as chief of the Mattamuskeet from 1718 until his death in 1740s, apparently residing on a 150-acre tract of the mouth of the Mattamuskeet Creek, later renamed the Middle Creek. After Squire's death, leadership struggle appears to have occurred, with power split between several individuals. Alexander Stewart, which we read about, remember he was the one baptizing all the Indians, right? Alexander Stewart, again, Stewart, you gotta prove to me this is a so-called white man. The Stuarts, the Highlanders of Scotland, these were colored people. King James, Stuart, reported after his 1761 trip to the area that Roanoke and Hatteras Indians had joined the Mattamuskeet and were residing with them at the time. All right, you see that? Stewart baptized more than 25 Indians during his visits 1761 and 1763. The Mattamuskeet Indians declined in number, and in 1792, entire reservation was sold for 50 pounds to a European settler. The deed was signed by 4 adult females and 3 children. All right, 3 children signed it, a deed. What really happened? A female and 3 children. Were they forced? That just sounds really weird to me. By the early 1800s, apprentice bonds I pay attention. Apprentice bonds, not slavery, apprentice bonds, indenture, right? In the contracts revealed that Mattamuskeet Indian youth were being taught trades by European masters. Afterward, the remaining individuals with Mattamuskeet Indian surnames were frequently referred to as free persons of color. Free persons afterwards, right? Afterwards, huh? After they were apprenticed. So, I like to think about this in many different ways because, I like to always be on my guard, when we're talking about dodging the hijack. So, I believe a lot of this time, because when you're talking about especially apprenticeship, a lot of time that was through the parents putting their kids in apprenticeship. So what if these so-called white masters were actually just the father many times, the dad putting their kid into an apprenticeship, and then and as the narration is told to us, all of a sudden we got white masters and Indian slaves, right? Or as it turns out, so-called Negro slaves, eventually through declassification. And then you add in the African, and all of a sudden you lose the original story. And I'm just telling you, you got to think like that because I found many cases like that already. So afterwards, the remaining individuals again, with the Mattamuskeets, Indian surnames were frequently referred to as free persons of color. Free persons of color. So where did the color come from? If these are supposed to be white masters, where's any mention of Africans? And apprenticed as such, and also listed in the Hyde County Census records under that classification. All right, Indians labeled free person of color after they're apprenticed. Even in the late 20th century, some Hyde County families, including the Collins, the Barber, Chance, Clayton, and Bryan families, can trace their Indian heritage back to the Mattamuskeet. All right, you have that surname, you Mattamuskeet. Believe it, know that. All right, know that. Now, I just want to remind everybody, all right, that this is a Muslim name. The Barber, we've already broke this down in one of my previous videos in the genealogical historical book used in Muslims in British colonial America. All right. So yeah. So if they're, Indian also, there's also a little bit of the cryptos, that were coming over. And that's just lineage. It's okay. This doesn't mean anybody's less Indian. All right. You're definitely Mattamuskeet. Okay. This is from the Mattamuskeet documents, a study in social history. All right. And this is 1975. So it's in the divisions of archives and history, archaeology in North Carolina by Patrick Garrow. All right. This is page 41. Let me just zoom in. It says there was little to distinguish the former free persons of color and the newly emancipated blacks in Hyde County following the Civil War. All right. Dodge the hijack crayon colors. What blacks? What you mean by that? There was little to distinguish. All right. The former free persons of color. We just saw who was the free persons of color, right? The Mattamuskeet. And the newly emancipated blacks in Hyde County following the Civil War. Although a few of the former free persons of color of Hyde County had received specialized training for skilled professions, remember the apprenticeship, specialized training. To me, a lot of the time, again, why would they be doing that to their slaves, right? I thought they were supposed to be working and all that. So they're training these people with actually professional skills. A lot of the time, again, and this is if you guys do your genealogy, dig a little further, you might find out that these are actually family members. A shout out to Wanagi for that video, for the lady talking about, what's the freedmen and all that, and how, yes, there were slaves, so-called slave masters in her ancestry, and one of them, it was her great great grandfather, but he was a colored man, and he didn't own no slaves. It was actually his wife and his family. It was all family. So they just labeled them slaves and all that. So again, these people putting these so-called children under apprenticeship, and then all of a sudden they're free persons of color. That's just, but again, it could just be just anybody owning, people, taking Indians from, their families and putting them in under an apprenticeship. These European settlers, they don't have to always be related. I'm just letting you know there's many different stories. So most had not been taught professions that placed them in a position to successfully compete with the former slaves. Former slaves had been trained as farmers practically from birth. Oh, yeah. Oh, so they were the farmers. Oh, okay. Farmers. Growing stuff. Yeah, they were the farmers. What if that was just natural, especially if they're Indian? Indians grew and farmed, so I don't think they had to be trained to farm. So dodge the hijack. Their former masters were more likely to utilize them as tenant farmers because of that training and possibly because of the paternalistic interest in their welfare. Paternalistic. All right. See, man, I didn't know they were going to say that. Sometimes I just want to oh, man, I knew I was right. Paternalistic interest in their welfare. These are their parents. All right. These are their parents. All right. They just threw it in there. I'm not making this up. They just threw it in there. Okay. I knew it. So that's what I'm saying. We got to be careful with these narratives they give us. Once it gets to the textbooks, then they're just saying a white master had a Negro boy under slavery, and then he freed him, and then he became a free person of color. You get what I'm trying to tell you guys? A lot of the time, again, it was paternalistic interest in their welfare. They were making sure their children were taken care of in the future, giving them skills. Even if they were half Indian, that was their children. That was their children. The former free persons of color were thus placed in a disadvantaged position. They were, as a group, both illiterate and propertyless. All of the free persons of color had been classified as mulattoes in the 1850 federal census. You hear that? But were distinguished as blacks or mulattoes in the following census. Marriage between free persons of color and slaves had been prohibited by North Carolina statutes well before the Civil War. But the unlawful Negro marriages filed in the Hyde County records, and it says see Appendix 39 for an example, indicate that mixture between the two groups was indeed taking place during this period. All right, mixture was definitely going on. You got Indian in your blood. Nobody's saying you're not an Indian. It was definitely going on. All right, they have records of this. Records indicated it was definitely taking place during this period. This is history. A study of the marriage records of the McKee family of Hyde County indicate that mixture between these Mattamuskeet descendants and blacks, all right, what blacks increased tremendously following the Civil War. A family of black McKees moved to Hyde County from South Carolina, right? A family from South Carolina, the Black McKees. McKee's an Irish name. Remember the McKees. Yo, shout out to Topcast for the breakdown on the McKees. I got a video coming on the McKees, and it might have turned out that he might be half Mattamuskeet and half Irish. The slum landlord, the first slum landlord, the McKee. He was one of the most wealthiest so-called colored persons, so-called black persons, in the 1900s, man. He had so much money and land. All right. Could he be possibly half Mattamuskeet? They're saying is the so-called slave part. Is that what they're saying? Is he's half a slave? Is the Mattamuskeet? We're gonna dig into that. So a family of black McKees moved to the Hyde County from South Carolina following the Civil War. Hyde County marriage records and personal interviews with Napoleon McKee and Jane B. McKee. This represented the first instance in which a family with the surname of McKee, who were not Mattamuskeets, had resided in Hyde County. Their presence, all right, they were not Mattamuskeets yet, you see? They're letting you know. They came from South, but they were so-called black. Black McKees. How did they become so-called black? McKees, because the McKee's an Irish name. Remember, at what point? We're going to dig into that. Their presence obscured the relationship of the contemporary McKees with the Mattamuskeets of that surname. These relations are further obscured by the fact that the two McKee families, there you go, sorry about that, intermarried rather freely. The two McKee families, so there was a McKee Mattamuskeet family, you heard that? And there was a so-called black McKee. I think they're just, trying to add a color there somewhere. They're trying to explain it some way. It says the same course of events took place in regards to other families in Hyde County who were at least partial Indian descent and culminated in complete loss of any Indian identity among those of the families. All right, so that's the hijack. They're trying to say you became so-called black. They're trying to make you a crayon color. You lost your Indian identity because you became a crayon color. That's what they're that's what they're saying right here, man. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they didn't want you to know about the Mattamuskeet because it's gonna get too interesting. It's not gonna make sense with the movie Roots. It's not gonna make sense with the movie Roots. Alex Haley plagiarizing fictional books called The African. It says one family of McKays had retained firm knowledge of their partial Indian descent, although they have no awareness of the group identity of their Indian ancestors. The contemporary spokesman for this family is Napoleon Poley McKee, who resides in Fairfield, North Carolina. Napoleon McKee traces his Indian descent to his great-grandfather Benjamin McKee, who was supposedly a pure-blooded Indian. The Hyde County records do offer data concerning Benjamin McKee and his household in the 19th century. Benjamin McKee was born presumably in Hyde County between 1825 1830. He married Mary Jane Barber, Barber, remember, of Hyde County. 1853, Mary Jane Barber was apparently the daughter of Bartiz and Morena Barber. I'm telling you, man, I can't make this stuff up. Morena Barber, Muslim surname Morena Barber, federal census 1850, and was about 15 years old at the time of her marriage. Miss Desi Barber, granddaughter of Benjamin and Mary Jane McKee, has stated that Mary Jane McKee's mother was white. All right, what does that mean? But this was not indicated in the available records. That's not what it said. So we need the actual primary source. Who said that? Because the primary source never indicated that. It just said it right here. I'm not making it up. It says not indicated in the available records. She was not called white. Benjamin and Mary Jane McKee had 2 sons and 3 daughters, aged 1 to 7 years by 1860. But the 1870 census listed only 2 daughters remaining in the household. All right. The history of the Mattamuskeets and their descendants may be typical of small fragmented triracial groups in other areas of the eastern United States. The Mattamuskeets lost their land very early. The key to that loss evidently was a combination of small group size and a lack of adequate leadership. These factors were probably compounded by pressure from white settlers and the ready market for land that those settlers provided. All right, that's the hijack again with the word whites. All right, European, they mean European settlers. They want you to think all Europeans were white. Break the spell. The population of the Mattamuskeets was augmented by the addition of a few of the surviving Indians from Hatteras and Roanoke Island in the mid-18th century, but the group that resulted lacked cohesiveness and property. The Mattamuskeets and their descendants were not represented in the Hyde County records during the period in which they owned little or nothing of value that was desirable to the so-called whites, and they mean Europeans. So I get a lot of the time it's hard to find these Indians in the census and all that. A lot of the time, again, Indians didn't make it to the census, unfortunately. And a lot of times Indians never owned land. They couldn't own land. The Indians of Hyde County never held public office and were not even represented on tax lists. All right, who were they really doing that? Remember who they were doing that to too. Why are they treating these people like this? Therefore, little was preserved in the records concerning the Indians from the time they sold their reservation in 1761 until they sold it again in 1792. It is quite evident from the available material that the Hyde County Indians declined in both population and social cohesiveness during the second half of the 18th century. It is unlikely that much of the original Indian culture survived to 1800. There is ample evidence that this trend continued into the 19th century and was accelerated through mixture with both so-called whites and blacks, all right, crayon colors. Mattamuskeet descendants were not referred to as Indian after 1804 and were generally grouped with free blacks, all right, in Hyde County under the title of free persons of color. Free persons of color. You're gonna tell me that everybody that's supposed to be so-called free black or free person of color was a slave or was coming from Africa? No, not always. Sometimes they were never even slaves. They were just Indians. And yeah, not African at all. By far. Says the policy of mass apprenticeships of the children of free persons of color. All right, apprenticeships, not slavery. Again, apprenticeships, and again, remember they said they had a lot of time paternal interest in their welfare. Family, kin, putting their children through an apprenticeship, a skill. Much love and respect to everybody in the chat. I love you guys too. I hope you guys enjoying this. And I'm like, I don't even got time to edit anymore and upload. So I'm just like, let me do it live, and just read it with everybody. I hope you guys enjoying it. And this is information they never even show us, man. Like, the brother sent me the email, and I was just like, wow, this is another one added to the to the proof, right? And then I'm like, I want to dig a little bit more on it, and I found all these other articles, and just learning about this is just like, it proves so much of the research, and it'd be like, you want to say slavery didn't exist? No, I didn't say that. I said the narrative is told wrong, man. The narrative is wrong, man. We ain't talking about roots, man. The policy of mass apprenticeship of the children of free persons of color in Hyde County from 1834 to 1865 undoubtedly destroyed what vestiges of Indian culture remained among the Mattamuskeet descendants. This effect culminated in almost total lack of Indian identity evidence by the contemporary Mattamuskeet descendants in Hyde County. All right, so I need you guys to do your research and your genealogy if you believe that you might descend from these indigenous people, because look what they did. You see, that's paper genocide. Indians in the eastern United States who have retained their identity as Indians had histories that were significantly different from the Mattamuskeet descendants. Very different. The Pamunkey and the Mattaponi of Virginia, as examples, both retain at least portions of their reservations and much higher populations than the Mattamuskeets. Other groups, such as the Lumbees of Robinson County, North Carolina, although lacking knowledge of their origins, although the Lumbee don't really, that's a whole different story, retain well-developed knowledge of their Indian ancestry. They just knew they were Indian. Like, we got Indian. We know. The Lumbees never had a reservation, but do have a very large population. All right. So that's a whole different story. We're going to get into all the tribes as much as we can. I'm going to dig, make sure we get all the facts and not just, what we read here and there. And, we're going to try to see, because even I'm not the one, we know that it's like a confederation, a lot of people coming together, create the Lumbees, a lot of different indigenous people, possibly indentured servants from Europe, Swarthy Europeans, hey, it's all up in there. It's okay. That's just history. That's what history says. You can't just, don't get mad at me. But definitely everywhere you see indigenous Indian tribes everywhere, and very few real Africans. A major methodological hypothesis presented in this paper has been proven for the Mattamuskeet example. It was obviously possible in the case of Mattamuskeet to begin with in a historically documented group, research county records that eventually identify contemporary descendants where none were previously known. The general applicability of this methodology remains untested. Future research projects of this type will have to be done on other North Carolina groups to determine whether or not this technique can be projected beyond the boundaries of the Mattamuskeet. All right, so I'm going to go to another article I have here. All right, this is actually from the Lost Colony Center for Science and Research, newspaper magazine articles. And it's so interesting. And I'm just going to share this with you guys right now. There's so many links here and information. Go ahead and go through it. Regarding this area and the lost colony and all that. One of the things that I wanted to show is this, like this guy's, believes he found the answer to the lost colony, man. And it makes a lot of sense. Lost colony's roots are found. He's saying that they didn't get lost. he's saying Francis Drake and all these people, Walter Raleigh, had a secret deal with Manateo's people to harvest a type of tree, a leaf that they wanted. All right, let me see. It's called the sassafras, but it was a secret that the Queen Elizabeth had sponsored because she wanted to make the money. She didn't want nobody else to know. So I guess when they couldn't, continue their colony or their plans, instead of telling everybody where they were, they just kept it a secret. That's what he's saying. And again, are these people disappeared or did they want you to think they disappeared? All right. So this article's in there. Go through it. It's really good. It's really, really good. I wanted to go to this one right here. All right. Let's see if we can zoom in. All right. Says here, Native Americans embrace their heritage. New center will feature cultural education and lost colony research. All right. Lost colony descendants. And the Indians, Evelyn Francis. It says Washington Daily News, Washington, North Carolina. This is from September 10, 2006. Written by Christina Hale, staff writer. Evelyn Francis King and her husband, William, have spent most of their life embracing their Native American ancestry in Martin County through genealogical research and area events. They did their genealogy, and guess what they found about their heritage? All right. You got to do your genealogy. You're telling me you got all slave ancestors and some, Kurimeo, well, some had to have come from Africa, I'm like, okay, fine. Do your genealogy, find out. See how many Africans pop up. Although William King has retired as chief of the Mattamuskeet Indian Coalition, Mattamuskeet, who? William, this guy right here. Remember free persons of color? Remember who they were? All right, that's him. This is modern times. Modern times, you saw? All the way from 1600. You survived, brother, elder. You're not extinct. You're not extinct. He said the powers are important because they keep the people together and support coming into the community, all right? So they organize all these annual powwows. This year's powwow was held last month at the Williams Community Center in Williamston. The celebration was open to the public and featured authentic native dances. There was no charge for the event, and vendors sold native arts and crafts. The traditional way to start a powwow is to set up the circle, then honor the four directions and the four winds, she said. All right, this is how they do it. A person will bless the circle by walking around the burning sage and flapping smoke with a feather while a prayer is recited, all right? A prayer, while a prayer is recited. The Native American flag and the U.S. Veterans flag are brought into the area during the grand entrance dance. The veteran dance can include any veteran that served in the military regardless of what you are wearing, she said. There are many different dances, including the women's traditional one, in which female participants place jingles on their clothes, and the drum beats come together to create a significant sound. Last month's event was a day-long one. All right. Although it lasted 8 hours, the event can be called a mini powwow because traditionally the celebrations last several days, she said. Traditionally, we were powwowing, all right, powerful powwows for days. All right, what? Giving honor, giving thanks, reciting prayers, blowing sage in the wind, right? Spiritual. This is a spiritual thing. All right? It's in your nature. I can tell by your actions and your nature how indigenous you are. And I can tell by your actions and your anger and your hate how maybe not indigenous you might be. You might be leaning to another lineage. I'm just saying. In the past, the Kings have not been able to organize a larger event because of the cost, but a new cultural center has offered to sponsor their future powwows. All right. Just want to emphasize this is Evelyn Two Braids King. All right. You see? A center for the lost colony research is in the development stages in Martin County, and will feature cultures of all kinds, including the Native American culture, said Evelyn King. The idea of the center started with Fred Willard, who has been researching the lost colony for 5 years, she said. He was given an old school building in the rural community of farm life in Martin County. The Kings have been asked to be on the board for the new center. Evelyn hopes to use the 4 acres on the property for future powwows. We won't have to take the money out of our pockets. It will be sponsored by the center. My husband and I will still be instrumental in organizing the event. She hopes to use the land to display a replica of our Native American village. Who? Ours. She said ours. She's not excluding her. She said ours. That's her people's back in the day, all right? Evelyn King has been researching Native American ancestry for 15 to 20 years. So you cannot try to say she's an African slave, all right? That's disrespectful for somebody to go and tell her, hey, no, you got to be African somewhere. She knows her genealogy. He said the Croatan Indians didn't get lost except to the people, all right? They never got lost, all right? Shout out to Kiowa. He got some Croatan in him. Shout out to Kiowa. Yes, sir. We migrated from the coast to the Bath and Shokowiniti area. Some look white, black, or in between. All shades, all right? All shades. He said people don't realize that Native Americans are just a mixture, but the native blood can be defined if you know your history. Relatives can look from white to dark, from white to dark. People don't realize this is her telling you. Look at her. She got relatives who are what? White and dark. She's trying to tell you something. Wake up. Stop with the colorization and all the prejudices. Evelyn King and her husband are descendants from the Mattamuskeet tribe, going back more than 10 generations, all right? 10 generations, which originated from the Free Union community near Jamesville. Both use their legal and native names. She is Two Braids and he is Whitesbear. She said native names are usually based on a person's character of personality. The name is brought forth and agreed upon by a number of people. That can be at a ceremony meeting or regular gathering. Her name was chosen to be Two Braids because she is most comfortable wearing her hair long and in two braids. She says she wears it like that just about every day. She represents, all right, except at church where she wraps it into a bun. Just in the church, she like, you should represent at church too, but that's a nail. I'll let her do what she want. Being Native American is something you feel, like when you hit a drum, all right? It's in your feeling, all right? Once we group meet with our brothers and sisters, we love them, all right? We love them. We don't hate them. We don't say, hey, you don't look like me. Hey, you're not, we love them. Once we meet up with our brothers and sisters, we love them. They embrace the love. We care for one another. We care for one another. That's what we're supposed to do. With a new center in the works, the Kings are looking forward to expanding their efforts in the community for sake of Native American ancestry. Their intent is to encourage the younger ones to regroup, carry on the heritage. We don't want it lost, all right? Don't want it lost, right? Shout out to the Mattamuskeet descendants and to the elders right there. And I just wanted you guys to see this is real life stories. It's not me making this up, all right? It's not me making this up. Let me just show you guys something else here. Real quick, we're about to be done. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me see. All right, so I just looked up Machapunga Indian tribe here on Google. I got all these nice images. And I found these ones right here. This is where I got the little girl on the cover. I just want to show you guys. Well, actually, I got it right here, I think. Well, first, let me go to the other one. Okay, here we go. So we got the Smithsonian website, National Museum of the American Indian, all right? From the Smithsonian website, collections, right? I ain't making this up. It says here, portrait of Machapunga, Pungo River, and it says / African American woman and girl. All right. So that's the hijack. There's no African here. See how they added the African? We just read all the history of the Machapunga. So this is the woman and the girl. hold up. Let me go back to the other one. So this is the one I colorized. I'm gonna show you the colorized version. So this see how. So people ask me sometimes, where you get these pictures, Kurimeo? I'm like, just gotta do the research. I didn't know about the Mattamuskeet or Machapunga, but as soon as I knew the name, right? As soon as it came to my awareness, I found the information, I found the pics, I found everything. It all matches. All right. It all matches. That's the hijack with the African. You know why I say that? Because look, they're calling her African too. African American woman. You see what I'm saying? They're calling her African American woman. That's the hijack. They're just putting words in here. They're just putting words in here. All right? And I just found man, this is kind of cool too. Let me I'm gonna do this for you guys. Let me put the link for this on the chat. They got so many different collections. Just go through all of them, different tribes from the East Coast that maybe we didn't run into. This is another one. This is a Nanticoke tribe. This is a future video on all these people. Look at her. I just want to show you guys because I'm going to show you the colorized versions. All right. Portrait of a John Nanticoke woman, post wooden framework, structure of a building wearing a coat with a button on a lapel and white head scarf in Cheswood, Delaware, from 1911 and 1914. All right. A Nanticoke indigenous girl. Okay. You're going to call her an African? No, you can't do that. That's disrespectful. You don't even know her. You don't even know her genealogy, and you don't know your genealogy. Okay. Let me see. What's that? Let's go back real quick. Let me show you this little cutie. Let me show you this little cutie. Nanticoke girl, look at her. She's like, yo, take the picture. Look at her. Very confident. What's up? Portrait of a John Nanticoke girl, a member of the Thompson family, posed outdoors next to other children at clapboard building, wearing a white fabric apron and cotton print plate press in Cheswood, Delaware. All right. Did they ever show you Indians like this? Did they ever show you Indians like this? These are the Machapunga Indians right here. Mattamuskeet Machapunga indigenous people right here. That's her and her mom. A Mattamuskeet Indian girl. Mattamuskeet indigenous girl. An Indian from America, yes. They never showed you this in school, right? And yes, that's her mom. That's her mom right there. That's the hijack. Oh, wow. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente.